Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unapologetix Live, the podcast where we read a Christian article and explain why it's stupid. And I am Brentley, and today we have a special guest. We got Secular Rarity, Elliot. How we doing, man?
Woo! I'm excited, man. I'm excited. This one's good. It doesn't take very long in this article before we get to some serious ridiculousness, in my opinion. If for those of our wonderful viewers that are watching the video, you can see the very first sentence already, and you can see I try to come to these things with evidence. I try to come with receipts, and here we are already, in my opinion. So yeah, it's a fun one. I can always count on you to provide me with an article that I had not heard of and truly would have been fine without ever seeing, but really provides some entertainment and an ability for me to just demonstrate how easy it is to debunk really stupid claims. That is one of my favorite things, is when you can read something from somebody or hear a really strong claim, and then with 3 words typed into a Google search bar, you can find out just how unfounded and bankrupt that claim is. So it's really great. Yeah. It's a fun thing for me. I love doing it. So yeah, I'm happy to be back, brother.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah, this one seems, it's like, I swear, it's almost like you said, like they're trying to find reasons to get angry.
Yes.
That don't make any sense. So I do want to give a quick trigger warning to everybody. We are going to read through this piece of shit word for word. So just so you know, I will try, if they do, like, I really do try to like not say the shitty things that they say. You know what I mean? Yeah. If they say like something really gross, then I will skip over like slurs and shit. I'm not going to say slurs or misgender.
Yeah. I don't believe this one goes that far. But yeah, they get pretty close, I think. So
I mean, it's like you said, just the first fucking sentence is, would you be willing to go to jail for using the wrong pronouns?
Yeah.
Fucking what, man? Where's that ever happened?
Yeah.
And it's not like this
is something we heard, I think maybe one of the first times, really getting around the public discourse was years ago when Jordan Peterson was arguing and yelling and crying about stuff. The reason that this is phrased like that is specifically because people know that it's inflammatory, right? Because, even on the, let's just be a little derogatory, even on the most of wokiest, of leftiest, of radical, liberalism, even on that extreme side, I think you are really never going to find people that are going to actively say, let's start passing laws that puts people in jails for simply using the wrong pronouns, right? Because the way that this is worded right here is it's worded in such a way as to say, like, even if you're mistaken,
yes,
if you just walk up to an individual you've never seen before in your life and you go, hello, ma'am, and they go, excuse me, it's sir, like the cops are going to suddenly bust out of the fucking walls and just start throwing handcuffs on you, And so that's obviously ridiculous. And again, I've never heard of a single person that stands on that stance.
No, it's harassment. Like, and this is something that they will do, though, so that they can then like cry about it, and be like, oh, look, all I did was use the wrong pronouns. And it's like, yeah, but over and over in a really shitty way where you're clearly trying to get a reaction. That's different.
Yeah. And I'll let you get through the next sentence or two, but I actually pulled up this bill. Again, it would be such a shame if somebody makes a strong claim like that to start off, their opinion piece. And then it's so easily debunked as just literally reading the bill. That would be a shame for anybody who wrote, an op-ed like Peter Demos. That would just be terrible if the entire premise of their whole freaking article that they spent however long or short on was able to be debunked that quickly. So hopefully that's not the case for him, because that would be embarrassing. But if it is, then we just have to do our job and air this out. So yeah.
Big waste of digital ink right there.
Yeah,
Greta Thunberg would be very upset.
Huge waste. Yeah.
All that waste. Okay, so here we go. So that question was on my mind recently as I prepared to preach at a church near Detroit on the topic of Christian civil disobedience.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to. This is because I've read through this a couple of times, and I pulled out some stuff that I knew I wanted to talk about. But the problem is that he mixes stuff really quickly, and so it's like I want to yell about Christian civil disobedience and how stupid of a phrase that is for a lot of different reasons. But I'm gonna wait, because I gotta talk to you about how wrong he is on this Michigan House of Reps bill first. So it's like,
right.
we got to progress, we got to take our time with it. We gotta stay calm, but it's a lot of stupid things all at once that needs to be pointed out. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I'd never heard of that either.
Yeah.
But all right. Here we go. Just a few days prior and long after I had started to prepare my sermon, the Michigan House of Representatives passed their latest progressive bill that could make using the wrong pronoun a felony, complete with jail time and fines up to $10,000.
Sounds terrible. It sounds terrible.
You can just say felony there too. Like we all know that felonies come with jail.
That's normally pretty.
Like, wait, the kind of felonies that come with jail time? This is crazy. What kind of felony is that?
Like, there's a bunch of felonies out there that are just like mandatory release this person. That's
it's a literal slap on the wrist. You just hand it.
So this bill that our good friend Petey is talking about right now is one of those bills that when you go to actually look at and read, you may get halfway through the bill and realize that the bill is already over about half a page ago, and it is now just defining terms. First off, I don't think the vast majority of our populace in the United States has ever really attempted to go through any actual legislation. Doing so is difficult in a lot of different ways, and one of the reasons that it is difficult is because in the United States we practice something called common law. This has been something that has been throughout our country. It is the way that we understand and interpret the meaning of legislation, especially older legislation that we can't just go ask people about today. Like, again, it would be a super huge shame if like all of the people that are writing this bill in Michigan are like just blatantly alive and you can just go hear what they have to say on it. That would be a shame, because then you could ask them a question and then they could answer it and say things like, oh, this is actually pretty commonplace language in this bill. This specific bill is something that has occurred a myriad of times, not just in Michigan, but in every state in the United States and in the federal sense as well. What this bill is specifically redacting older versions of legislation and updating them for new understandings. Okay. So this is something that we have done, again, on a regular basis. For a very long time in the United States, it was completely legal for, let's say, just throwing out weird examples, like let's say a white guy to actively beat the shit out of somebody for no other reason than the fact that their skin was dark. Okay. Crazy. I know. Ridiculous how that was the case, but it was. For a very long time, it was legal. Then there was a period of time where it wasn't legal, but we also never criminalized it.
Yeah, it was like seatbelt laws or something.
Yeah.
Like we were just like, okay, but we don't really. Yeah. That's fine, buddy.
Yeah, like, hey, look, we've got seatbelts, but you really don't have to put your child in one if you just have a strong compulsion otherwise. Like there was a period of time where drinking alcohol and driving a vehicle was completely legal simply because of the fact that there was no prohibition against it. So for like decades, people would just drive super plastered and just kill people. And people would be like, man, what a terrible thing. Wish we could figure out how to stop this. And then finally somebody was like, why don't we just make it illegal to drive drunk, guys? That seems like a good one.
We can measure this. We can, we can check.
We can totally figure this out. So there's a period of time in the United States where like the idea of a hate crime really didn't exist, right? And for some obvious reasons. I think one, because there was a period of time when we were just outright shitty to a lot of people for immutable qualities and characteristics that supposedly are enshrined in our, Constitution and so forth, the founding documents and all that. But basically, we started to update these things on a regular basis once we realized that there were aspects of these laws that did not encompass everything. Right. So, for instance, I'll use this example because this is actually something that's come up in a couple of different places recently, and I think is worth talking about. So, the caste system, is something that is not exactly about your race. It's not.
Okay.
It's not exactly about the color of your skin. It's also not exactly about the country that you come from, your national origin. It also isn't exactly about your religion, because caste exists in Islam, in that area of the world, in that the Indian subcontinent and so forth. And it's not just found in Hinduism, right? There are people that are not Hindus that are still unfortunately afflicted by this. It's not exactly about your economic status. It's not about your sexual orientation or your gender identity. It's not about any of those things. It is its own specific thing that is different. And by not having on the list of protected classes caste, you unfortunately allow a lot of individuals to fall through the cracks and be discriminated against in a way that really should fall under hate crime laws, right? So if, for instance, somebody were to, let's just as an example, if, for instance, a boss were to walk up to one of their workers one day and just start yelling slur after slur after slur, anti-Semitic slurs at this worker, and then fire them and say it's because, and then say a bunch of anti-Semitic slurs, well, that's a problem. And not only is that a problem just on like a moral level, hopefully we all agree on that. We don't need to convince anybody why that's bad. But it's also a problem on a legal level that is protected, because that could fall under either the religion side of it, if that individual is a religious Jewish person, or it could just simply fall under the ethnicity side of it if they are Jewish by heritage, right?
Right.
So the problem is, though, right now, if you go out there and you start yelling at somebody and making fun of them and criticizing them for being in a particular class, especially a lower class, right? Like the Dalits are the lowest class. They are often the ones that experience this hatred. If you go do that and then you fire them and you tell them that's the reason, there's actually nothing protecting them. There's no law in place that protects those people right now throughout the United States. And that's problematic, okay?
Yeah.
This bill, I said all that to say this, because I'm finally going to get back around to it, I swear, folks, which is, that is what this bill does. This bill just updates prior language that has existed for decades and makes it something that is now applicable in today's time. That's really all it does. It basically just says we're changing the one in the past that says an ethnic crime to a hate crime, because it's not just about ethnicity. And it would make no sense to say this is an ethnic crime when what you are doing is discriminating against somebody because of, let's say, their religion. That's a protected class. Whether or not the rest of the atheists out there with us say, oh man, I think it's, hey, we can make fun of Christians all the time. It's like, yes, you can, but you can't fire somebody because they're Christian. Okay.
Exactly.
You can't criminalize somebody because they're Christian, right? You can say that the ideas are hateful. You can criticize the ideas all day, right? But the people themselves are not criminalized because of the fact that they hold a particular belief or their heritage is from something particular. So again, what this law does is exactly the same thing that we have in almost every state in the country already, right? And even on a federal level. It literally just updates the language to include the fact that if you are purposefully discriminating against somebody due to their gender expression or gender identity, you have the potential of having a court case brought against you. You have the potential of receiving a fine. Again, fine up to $10,000. You can be fined a single dollar. You can be. That is possible, right? There are some laws that have a mandatory minimum out there. This is not one of them. It just isn't. And I think mandatory minimums might have problems in and of themselves, but that'll take me down too long of a rabbit trail there. But the point is, like, already this person has completely obfuscated the framing of this bill. And if you were simply to change the way that this is stated here, absolutely everybody would agree with it, because this bill honestly is nothing. This bill is a nothing burger. It is 100% just doing the bare minimum to keep pace with things that we understand. Again, there was a period of time in the United States where criminalizing somebody or beating the crap out of somebody in broad daylight simply because they were homosexual really wasn't a thing. Like, yeah, cool, you beat somebody up and that's not okay. But there was a time where we had on the books that said, if you beat somebody up in public and you're specifically calling them the N-word repeatedly, that's a hate crime, and that gets extra punishment because it is extra heinous. But that didn't exist for homosexuals. So what did we do? We updated the law, and we included sexual orientation as being included in those protected categories, which again, it is. It falls under the category of sex. It absolutely does. And anybody that has a disagreement with that, I just ask you, would you do the same? Would you treat somebody the same if, for instance, you say, well, here's a problem. We've got this man marrying this man. And it's like, right, so if the sex of one of those individuals was changed, then there wouldn't be an issue. Correct. Well, then there you go. You're discriminating against these people based on sex. Like, it's that simple. It is that simple. And exactly. So, again, this 100% falls in line with all the other things that are already on the books in existence, both in the United States, in individual states, on a federal level, in other countries around the world. This is absolutely common language, boilerplate. The bill is boring, is what I'm telling you, folks. It is not interesting in the slightest. It does not deserve this amount of attention. I have so ungraciously stopped Brentley from continuing on in this article for the last 10 minutes. It doesn't deserve this much attention from me, but I have to say all of this because this asshole goes out and writes this long article and just completely misframes it the entire time. And it's just like, again, it is so simple. This is so basic, and a slight amount of civic understanding about the United States and how legislation is done. Nobody would look at this and think anything. Nobody would take a second glance because the bill is so freaking tiny, because basically all it does is go, hey, you guys remember how we had that other law for a really long time? We just think we should add a couple of things to it and then change some of the outdated language on stuff. Like, we're including sexual orientation in here, so we probably shouldn't call it an ethnic crime anymore. It's kind of weird, right? Yeah. Just hate crime. Yeah, we should just do the same thing that everybody else has done already across the country. Yeah, cool. Everybody feel good about that? Awesome. Great. Like, that's it. It's nothing. It is absolutely nothing. But again, this is what happens is this guy writes, 3 sentences and then gets to frame this in such a way, and that just travels all over the world, right? Just like our good friend Jordan Peterson, right, gets to post one freaking video yelling and screaming that he's going to go to jail for misgendering somebody, and then you just go read the law, and it's like, oh, this is actually pretty standard language. Like, this isn't nothing about this is particularly inflammatory, except for the fact that the way you framed it.
I was
Right.
gonna say, yeah, because I was gonna say I don't, I watch a lot of stuff where they bring up like really like great progressive like strides forward and everything. Never heard a damn thing about this one.
Yeah, this
You
is
know?
not this is not a this is not a great progressive stride forward. This is the bare minimum of keeping pace with our knowledge of the world around us, you know? It's honestly one of those moments where it's like, "Oh man, wait a second. Are you telling me that technically up until now we could legally discriminate against people just because of their sexual orientation, because of their gender identity? Man, I feel like we should have figured that one out a while ago, guys. Maybe a little bit behind on this. If this is the latest progressive bill from Michigan, I feel bad for the progress that they've been making. Now, granted, I'm not positive that my state of Tennessee has gender identity and expression as a protected class, but I think that's, for a few obvious reasons. We've got currently a Republican Christian nationalist government that is actively trying to make our state hell on earth. But that's just my opinion.
I totally feel you on that down in Florida.
Yeah. We know. Yeah. Right. I'm not sure either of our states have made this progress yet. But again, a very basic understanding of laws in the United States would tell you that nothing about this bill is outside of the norm. Nothing about this bill is particularly inflammatory, and just flat out, you will not go to jail for using the wrong pronouns. Just like as maybe I think it is something that you shouldn't do. Maybe I think it's a bad idea to just go around using the N-word regularly to offend people of color. I think that's bad. You know what, though? You're not actually going to go to jail for that. You're not. Just plain and simple. And I think that's the right call. As messed up as that can be, like, you have a right as a human being to stand up and say hateful, disgusting things like that. But yeah, there is a line, and this bill just puts Michigan just at the bare minimum of being in that book. It's silly. It's weird because, again, it technically means like Nazis get to go say their terrible things. They do, though. They do.
Yeah.
But if you repeatedly say those things in a manner that is clearly aggressive and harassing of individuals, especially if that is connected with violence or threats, especially if that is connected, then that's when this law kicks in. You accidentally misgender somebody, or you misgender somebody on purpose, and then they correct you, and you grumble, and you walk away, and you start saying a bunch of slurs under your breath, or you say them to your friends. Nobody's coming for you. That isn't what this bill does. It's not the point of it. And framing it that way is purposefully stoking tensions, because let's just yell about the trans people. That seems to be what the playbook is from the right now, because they know it works. Unfortunately, they know it gets people angry.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, like if it's in the context of like at a workplace or something like that, or a school, shit like that, where people pay to go to those places and have the right to be there as a member of the public. Yeah, you can't be doing that stuff there. But like, yeah, if you're even online, you can go to 4chan. Nobody's going to arrest you for going to 4chan.
Absolutely. And this is, I know I've gone very hard. Just we haven't made any progress hardly, Brentley. I'm so sorry about that. Right. I swear I'll keep moving. But this is why I will hardcore criticize the Supreme Court and a good handful of their recent decisions. The recent decision regarding the wedding website designer is so disgustingly wrong. And one of the reasons is because it puts us back into a time where Black individuals in the United States, especially ones in the South, had to collect a book by themselves. They had to physically go from place to place to find individuals who ran businesses in small towns that wouldn't lynch them in their sleep. They collected these places, wrote it down, and published it themselves and had to distribute it quietly. That's what the Green Book is. That's what the Green Book is. It is a map that saved people's lives as they were doing nothing but trying to travel from one state to the other, which is a constitutional right, a fundamental aspect of what it means to live in the United States. That is what happened in our country, because it was flat out not illegal for a hotel at midnight in a thunderstorm to look at a Black family and slur and just say slur after slur after slur and then kick them out on the streets. Okay. There was a period of time where you, as the business owner, could call the police officer to kick out that family for no other reason than the fact they were Black. That's disgusting. That is absolute shameful aspect in our history. And there was a period of time where that was completely legal. And then finally, our Supreme Court said, if you're going to be open to the public, you must serve the public, period, end of sentence. Now, you can still create a private establishment that is 100% discriminatory. You can absolutely do that, okay? Totally legal still. Seems a little weird, but totally legal still. But if you open your doors to the public, you have to serve the public, and you're not allowed to discriminate against people for a handful of different things, these protected classes. Race is definitely on there. Race and ethnicity, 100% on there. Your sex, your sexual orientation, abso-freaking-lutely. Your gender identity and gender expression absolutely are a part of that. And they need to be codified as such. We need to make that bare minimum progress in society. And the Supreme Court recently decided to take a major step back on that. And that's gross. And that's why we need these bills. That's why this bill from Michigan is absolutely needed. Because if our Supreme Court wants to gut these very basic fundamental protections on a federal level, then they need to be enshrined by the states. They have to be, because otherwise we're going to see a return to the 40s and 50s, where there is an entire group of people in our country that is not able to access the bare minimum of what it means to be a United States citizen. That's gross. Everybody should be against that. Absolutely everybody, especially the hardcore America First people. There's a reason that we're the greatest nation in the world, and it's because we protect all of our citizens. That's the answer. Not because we actively discriminate against people and make that legal. So I swear I'm off my soapbox now. I swear I am. I'm going to move on. I will. But I had to get that in strong, because it is so frustrating, especially when paired with that Supreme Court decision. It is a major, major step back. And I genuinely want to instill in people a feeling that our Supreme Court is not legitimate. I just do. It's not a legitimate body anymore. It has absolutely grown out of its original intention and is way, way too powerful. And we just need to make changes. We just do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway. No, I totally agree. It's really frustrating, like all the different solutions for it. I don't know. It seems difficult, to, I wish they would have just gone ahead and stacked it, but
Yeah. And yeah. It's a whole crazy conversation, because it has become a branch that has truly outsized authority, right? It absolutely has way too much power. The checks and balances on it are essentially non-existent. And in part that is the fault of both our Senate, our Congress as a whole. That is partly their fault, and it's partly our fault as the average person, because for a very long time we held such a high reverence for that position. When you were a Supreme Court justice, we basically thought the sun shone out your ass. And that's on us. We got to stop feeling like that. We got to stop feeling that these people are somehow just infallible, incredible legal minds. They're not. They're not. Half of them haven't even sat on freaking benches, you guys. Go look through the history of our Supreme Court. Like, it's not as, like, what did Amy Coney Barrett do to get that job, right? What did she actually do?
Be
and
an
when you go look
extremist?
at yeah, when you go look at it, you're gonna be disappointed. You're gonna be like, man, I could have sworn you had to be like a super long-term judge or something. Nope, sure don't. Get a law degree and that's it. That's all you need, guys. She's more accomplished than just a law degree, but also not by much. So, like, let's, anyway, I swear, we're back to it. Okay, back to it. It's not a coincidence. This is not a coincidence. This is divinely ordained, Brent. That's what happened.
I was gonna say coincidence. Yeah. No, I believe it was divinely ordained. Oh my good God. Okay.
Ridiculous.
Have you ever considered how we as Christians in America are more like Pilate than we'd like to admit? Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent, yet he succumbed to social fear, demonstratively washing his hands of all responsibility before the masses.
So this is great. This one's great. And don't worry, folks, we're gonna get back to like Christian civil disobedience. He goes a little bit further, I think, into it, but I want to point this. I want to point this out about the Pilate analogy here. I'm particularly interested as to why he chose that one.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's odd to me, but I'd like to point out something that I think is really worthwhile. This is in Matthew's gospel. Okay. So Matthew is the second gospel. It seems to go Paul's letters, the fake Paul letters, Mark, and then Matthew. So Matthew expands on some things that Mark talks about. And if you are at all interested in what any of the scholarship is, you don't need to change your whole theology, but you should actually just go learn about your book. So if you do that, you'll come to find that Matthew is often considered a gospel that is attempting to speak in a language that the Jewish people would be more comfortable with, right? With that being said,
that was the one where like Jesus, like he follows a lot of the Jewish laws and stuff like that. Yeah. Like they're
like specifically pointing them out and talking about them and saying like, hey, like, look at me, I'm Jesus, I'm doing all the Jewish stuff. Like, obviously I'm super real. Look at all the Jewishy stuff I know. And it's like, yeah, okay, laying it on a bit thick, Matthew, but all right, cool. We got it.
Right. Because they like, so just real quick, there's the, the four gospels, right? And then you have, they claim, and this, I learned this when I was a Christian, that each of the different gospels was directed to a different group of people, right? Like one of them was, I think it was Luke, was like directed to the Romans, and it's like real short and to the point. Right. No, nothing added. And then John is the one. So it's like the Jews, the Gentiles, or the Jews, the Romans. I think, and the John was to the world. Everybody was supposed to get that one. So yeah, it's just each one was kind of like trying to rope in a different demographic, right?
Yes, and and it's purposeful. This is something that, again, I think really gives your faith a more robust foundation. But I ultimately think it leads you to be like, why would you trust the accuracy of this? But hey, some people don't go as far as me. But anyway, this gospel is well known as being a gospel that was attempting to frame Jesus's life and of course Jesus's death specifically around the Jewish people. And it is fairly common for this scene relating to Pilate. It is fairly common for scholars to talk about this as an explicitly anti-Semitic argument. Okay? The reason that Pilate washes his hands so publicly in the gospel, the reason that Pilate is so adamant about not wanting to kill Jesus. Oh, he just couldn't help it. The crowd was too strong. Oh no. And who was that crowd? Jews. That's who was that crowd. Why?
Yeah.
Why was that the crowd? Because the Jewish people killed the Messiah. Therefore, our hatred is justified. That's how that verse has been used throughout history. That is most commonly cited as a potential as to why this scene plays out so extensively in Matthew. Nobody else mentions it. None of the other gospels mention it. Now, that's not uncommon. We know that all of the gospels don't really line up in a lot of ways, but it seems kind of weird that this one text that seems to be real Jewish for a lot of it then has this point where it kind of seems to be hardcore criticizing the Jews. You know what, though? We see that today. We absolutely understand this playbook. It happens all the time. One example of this is some of these bot accounts over the last handful of years that have been utilized by various actors around the world to sew themselves in as a legitimate source, right? You start seeing this account, it starts saying all these things that are like super duper liberal. And you're like, man, that must be, that person's real. They're serious, they're on my side. And then you slip in this one thing and you go, man, this is, they're going too far. And you go, oh, wow, you know what? Yeah, that's a good point. And I've agreed with this person on so many of the other things. Yeah, maybe I should have. And the next thing you know, it goes a little further and it goes a little further and it goes a little further. This is what happens with radicalization a lot of times. We see people that slowly start to go down this pathway. And one of the reasons is because they've got this source that seems to speak to them really, really well. But then there's that one little anti-trans thing that comes in at the end. And they go, maybe that's a good point. Maybe I could, okay, I see it. And they slowly start going down that route. So again, it's funny to me that he uses that to say we're more like Pilate than we'd like to admit, succumbing to the social fear. Oh, the masses. Oh no. When in reality, that verse seems to be more directed at people who want to hate Jews. And I would argue that in the United States currently, one of the largest sources of anti-Semitic behavior is from Christian nationalists. Despite their claiming of being all about Judeo-Christian values, trust me, they'll cut off that fucking Judeo part just as soon as they can.
Oh yeah.
They don't agree with them either.
No, and they, it's all about the reason that they seem to like them, and they don't like them, they like the country that they came from or whatever that represents them is Israel, right? And the only reason they like that is because Jesus said that that's where he's going to be coming back to, so they need that place in order for their little end times whatever to happen, and that's it. Like it's that they could give a fuck less beyond that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Crazy.
It is specifically using the Jewish people and their heritage and their teachings as a means to an end. Something that hopefully we've got some people out there who are a little familiar with some philosophy and morality and stuff and would recognize that phrase as being problematic. So again, it's interesting to me that he chose that particular moment to highlight and be like, hey, have you ever thought about it? But like Christians in America are kind of like this fake person who, well, Pilate was probably real, but this character in this story who like is often utilized as a super anti-Semitic thing. Like, we're kind of like that, aren't we? Like, have you noticed? That's a weird thing to say, in my opinion.
But I'd agree with him. Yes,
I would
y'all
too.
are like that.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying that it's a little odd to me, and it's kind of one of those moments where it's like, I don't know that you meant to say that. Right. I don't know that you understand what you're saying, but it's not as good as you think, my friend. So yeah, just
Right.
again worth pointing out. And again, I'll try to make these shorter, but it's difficult sometimes. I just, I don't get this opportunity to yell about stuff as much sometimes. So it's nice you let me come here and you just kind of take me off the leash and you're like, no, just run around for a little bit.
No,
Get
just
rid of
go.
some
Do
of
it.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, do the thing. You're good. Oh, that's awesome. All right, here we go. So, how often do we allow the fear of man to control us? More importantly, how often do we choose to submit to the fear of man over the fear of God?
Isn't that just disgusting right there?
Jesus.
So what he's saying is, by the way, not that the fear, not that the fear in and of itself is problematic, right? Because I would argue like fear of the masses, doing things just simply for fear of the masses is not a good reason. Like that's not a good way to persuade people, right? We shouldn't be utilizing fear as a way to get people to do things. That's problematic. That's harmful. Reason, logic, compassion, those are the things that we do. Understanding, nuance, that's how we do it. But like I just think it's so interesting that he's like, fear of man is bad, 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 bad. And you would hope that the person would go, yeah, because fear as a tool to get people to do stuff is a bad method. That's harmful. But actually what he's saying is, no, you just need to be afraid of the right thing. You just got to be
Yeah.
afraid of the right thing. When you're afraid enough about God kicking your ass, well, then you go and do good things. That's gross. That's a bankrupt morality. That is absolutely disgusting. You are doing things not because they are the right things to do. You are doing them because you are afraid that you will be punished by a magic man. That's
Right.
gross. Do things for the right reason, which is because they are right, because they are good. That's the reason you should do stuff. But again,
And that scares me too, because that's like this type of reasoning here is like the type of reasoning that gets people killed. That gets people hurt because like
absolutely.
I don't even care about what man thinks now. Now it's I get to do that. Like I believe God told me to hurt this person. Whatever.
Exactly.
And they could easily find a Bible verse in there. It literally says to murder your child if they
Yeah.
talk back or drink.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The
this
Bible's
makes
not shy about letting you know that fear is the motivator it likes to use, and it uses it in terrible ways. And yeah, it's just so frustrating. But you see this, you see this in their tactics when you look at the Christian nationalists across the United States right now. You see fear as their number one tactic. That's the reason they're passing so many bills. That's the reason they're framing this particular bill, which is essentially nothing, essentially a massive nothing burger waste of your time reading through the bill, right? Because it is just standard boilerplate language. But what does he do? He stokes fear. He stokes fear, and then he tells people, now see, you're afraid of the wrong thing. See, you should be afraid. That's the correct response. But you should be afraid of the right thing because of the horrible things that it's going to do to you. Like, what's the worst that can really, I mean, look, hey, you don't want to go to jail. That's for sure. That's terrible. A fine of $10,000. That's terrible. You should be afraid of that. But you should be more afraid of being tortured eternally by a giant baby who's so upset because you didn't follow his hateful message. That's what you should really be afraid of. Like, thanks, man. You absolutely are the one who has a solid foundation for your morality, right? Your moral compass is pointed in the right direction, not me, this silly old atheist over here who, like, just wants to be not harmful to people because harming people is like wrong. Yeah, you're the one who absolutely has your arrow pointed correctly, brother.
right.
So
And it's almost like this isn't surprising either, just because like fear really does, especially in this day and age, it works. I
yeah,
mean, that's what gets people to
yeah,
donate money to a
yeah,
wall
sure.
that needs to, and then they just pocket the money and the
Oh my
people,
gosh, yeah.
whatever, because like, hey, they don't want those types of people here, in our country, so
Mm,
and it's just because of the fear of them. Yeah, it works, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah.
uh,
And it's terrible. It's terrible that it is effective, because people look at that, people look at results a lot of times and say, well, the results are right, therefore this method is correct. But that's because they don't understand that there are lots of methods that can get you to certain results, especially if you've just already made up your mind about what those results need to be. If at the end of the day the answer is, well, I just need everybody to stand the fuck up, well, yeah, when you put a gun to people's head, people will stand up, because I don't want to die just for sitting in this chair. That seems really stupid. And if that's the only consequence is me standing up, then yeah, I'll probably do that for you, man.
Got
But
it. I'm on it.
but the consistency of that, right? You know, how many times can you run that play before it just completely shuts down? And the answer is, as the days go on, you can't run that same play more and more. And that's why we're seeing so many people stand up and fight. That's why we're seeing so many cries for freedom around the world, is because you as a horrible, disgusting, oppressive regime in Iran, you want to put a gun to the face of people protesting for just their right to live. And yeah, sure, you're going to stop a few protests that way. Absolutely. You're going to kill some of your citizens. Abso-freaking-lutely. But that's the reason that more and more people continue to come out. That's the reason that Iran is having one of the greatest moments in their history, is because of the fact that the more you try to intimidate people for what is basic morality, for what is basic in terms of just being human, the more they will stand up in the face of that smoking gun and say, load it again if you have to. Because eventually that play just doesn't work. Everybody knows it, everybody gets it, and they're tired of it, and they won't let it happen anymore. So yeah, again, fear is an absolutely disgusting, terrible motivator. But this guy says, as long as you're afraid of the right thing, that's how you find goodness. That's where you find the true benefit to society. But
Right.
yeah,
It's so manipulative.
ridiculous.
It's gross. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, let's see. Here we are. All right. When confronted with attacks on biblical values or on the body of Christ, do we give in to social pressures that oppose God's word, remaining silent to avoid confrontation or ostracization? Do we stand up for truth, or even if it means the loss of our job, our friends, or in Michigan, our freedom?
Again, just absolutely
Wow.
stupid. Just a ridiculous framing. But I'm gonna let him go till this Matthew verse here, because I think it makes a better point. But yeah, again, it's the same garbage, where it's just he's framing it in such a way as to be inflammatory, so that people will be like, oh my gosh, like, I
Oh,
can't
wow.
believe they do that, you know? Oh my gosh, that's so horrible. But like, let's just real quick, you guys, just real quick. Like, let's look at one of those claims there, the friends thing. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Um, let's take an example where you have a friend of yours, that really, really cool dude. You've known him forever. You guys have, tasted the salt of life, as Aristotle would say. You've gone through some trials and tribulations. You've grown to, with each other and all that good stuff. And they just happen to be Jewish. And then you've got this other guy that you also know pretty well, the same, done the things, grown, all that good stuff, helped each other out, moved from one apartment to another, yada, yada. And they're a Nazi.
Okay.
What's wrong?
Didn't see
What's
that
wrong
one
with
coming.
losing the second friend there? What's wrong with losing the second friend? Somebody please make an argument to me where every single person who finds themselves in that position needs to still be friends with that hateful bigot. Explain
Right.
that to me. Somebody help me, please. Make that make sense to me. So like, yeah, there are examples here that they're not as radical and ridiculous as he's trying to frame it. He's trying to say, "Oh no, all of your friends are just going to turn around and stop being friends with you and blah 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 blah." And I think most of us would recognize, although we might not like to say it out loud because that means that we have to take responsibility, but I think most of us would like to recognize that if I as a friend was constantly running around, slapping my friends in the back of their head, punching them even every so often, or just constantly yelling slurs at them for really even no reason, just kind of unprovoked, right? Like, I mean, I, I think we would all be comfortable with going, hey, man, people shouldn't really be your friend, SR. Like, people shouldn't hang out with you anymore because you kind of suck as a friend, you know? So it's like that when you put it in the full context, it's like, okay, so yeah, if you're being a hateful bigot regularly and then you lose all your friends, bro, uh, I don't I think the problem is you being a hateful bigot, not that your friends left you. Again,
Yeah, there's
like,
reasons here for these
right,
things, you know.
right.
It's
Yeah, again, if you have a boss who walks up to one of your coworkers and says the N-word repeatedly to them and then fires them and says the reason is because you're an N-word. Like, I don't have a problem with that boss losing his job. Is our buddy Pete here trying to say that he's upset about that? He wants the rights of the bigot boss in that scenario to be more protected? I don't think so. I think he's wrong on so much of this article. I think he has lots of ideas that I would disagree with, but I'm gonna go as far as to say the man is human enough, and I'm gonna be as charitable as I can to say he probably wouldn't stand on the side of the racist boss there, and for good reason, because it's wrong and it's harmful. And so, why would this be different because the person is trans? Where's the disanalogous situation here?
well,
All
and
you literally
technically, he could actually, the person you're talking about in your scenario could point to the Bible to be like, here's why I'm a bigot against
Oh, well,
biblical,
yeah, I
the
mean, yeah,
heathen that
totally.
surround me, you know. Yeah, there's a lot.
Absolutely. The Bible was regularly used to justify slavery in the United States. So,
Right.
yeah,
So
for
yeah.
sure, for sure.
So
I
if
mean,
anybody's thinking that that analogy is far, it's not. It's not a
yeah,
far off analogy.
right,
You could
right.
totally point to the Bible and be like, "Here's why I think it's okay to do that to people of color." Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Anyway.
So it's crazy too. I thought he was going to use the just with the way he's talking here.
Mm-hmm.
He's going into this Matthew verse, right?
You thought
But
he
I
was going to
thought,
pick a different one.
yeah, well, I thought he was going to be like, "Fear not, the person that
Uh,
can kill you." I can't remember where it is,
mm-mm,
but it's like they kill
mm-mm.
you, and it's like, only fear the one that can send both body
Uh-huh.
and soul into hell or
No,
whatever.
he goes a different route, which I think is great, honestly, because yeah, I'll wait. I'll let you read it for the viewers, and then I'll say why I think it's great. But
Yeah, here we go. Um, I often think of Matthew 12:30, and how we, as followers of Christ, cannot be lukewarm about the convictions of our faith.
uh-huh.
Okay, here's the verse, I guess. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters.
So here's why I think it's great that he picks this verse, is because at this point um I feel the mask has fallen. I feel that the plans have been laid bare. And this is not coming from a legitimate place. So that that verse is a specific verse that is used in this black and white context, right? This is specifically attempting to stoke tensions and divide people, right? This is not
Right.
a verse that is intended to bring people together. This is a verse that is specifically trying to get a small community of individuals to be completely insular and antagonistic towards other groups so as to gain strength in their numbers and grow. This is a verse that is explicitly used and has been throughout history to justify hateful, terrible, destructive things. And the reason is because you're not with me. Because you don't stand shoulder to shoulder as we actively perpetuate harm on people, you also must be the subject of our hatred and our harm.
Yeah.
That's what this verse is. This verse is what is used to justify the Holocaust. This verse is what is used to justify the Crusades. This verse is what is used to justify every manner of atrocity that can be traced back to a religious thinking. This verse. And this is a verse that is scattered amongst various religions. Absolutely, absolutely the Islamic understanding of who one should be according to Allah, of how one should act according to Allah. This comes up, this concept comes up, and it's destructive because it is purposefully dividing people on arbitrary lines. People who truly do not sit in the same camp whatsoever. But what it is doing is it is saying, you have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Either you're a good person for no other reason than the fact that you agree with me, or you are the most wicked, horrible, harmful piece of shit that could possibly exist. You are either righteous because you agree with me, or you're the absolute spawn of Satan, the incarnation of evil itself. It's disgusting. It is another place that we find in religion that is in no way, shape, or form wanting to bring people together. That's what frustrates me when I hear religious people talking about the power of faith to just go over all of those different dividing lines, and somehow through the glory of God, we can find a commonality amongst us. No, we can't, because your religion exclusively says either I am in lockstep or I am an enemy. That's what this says, and that's how it's been used. And so the reason why I like the fact that he used this verse here is because I feel more and more what we're seeing from a lot of people on the farther right, on the Christian nationalisty side and so forth, is they're starting to say the quiet parts more loudly. And I don't want to represent somebody inaccurately. I'll let you tell your story, and then I'll show people where it's obvious your story is hateful, where it's obvious that your story is not completely genuine. He started out this whole conversation framing this as, be afraid. They're coming for you. Be afraid. They're coming. They're coming fast. They're going to get you. And you know what? You know why they're coming to get you? It's actually because they're just terrible people to begin with. So again, it's clear now how he's laying this out. He starts it out with fear. He tells you why you should be afraid. And then he says, and by the way, they're just terrible people. So it's a continuation of stoking those fears. It's purposeful as a matter to again to divide people and keep that anger high, because that's what gets people to act on this side. And again, and you, I'm glad you brought up that the other verse about, don't fear the ones that can kill you, fear the ones who can, fear the one who can do the ultimate punishment for it. Because if truly he was trying to go, if that's where his focus was, right, he would have used that verse. Right. He would have you. There are better verses to make the point about where your fear should properly be placed under the Christian system. But instead, he uses a verse that is explicitly about dividing people into two groups. And one of those groups, the reason that they're not with you is just because they're bad people. And he literally says that explicitly in the very next sentence. The very next sentence after that verse he uses is, this explains why cracks and gaps in steadfastness lead us down paths of unrighteousness. He literally says it. So yeah, that's why I was happy that he used it, is because it's like, look, man, say it with your chest. If you truly believe these terrible things, if you truly have hate in your heart, let it out. Say it with your chest. You know, stand up for what you believe in, and be honest with people. And he was. And that's
Yeah.
cool, I guess, in some sense. You know,
Right.
still terrible, obviously. Still disagree and don't like the message, you know, think it's completely unfounded and gross. But at least I'm glad he's willing to raise his hand and say, yes, I want to be hateful. That's what I'm actually intending here. So
Right. And it's also like, okay, it's almost like a, I hear this one the most when it comes to, like cult initiation type
mm,
shit, you know, where they're trying to get you away from your family and your loved ones and everything.
yep,
My other thing I would, want to mention about it is just, it's a fallacy. It's called the fallacy of excluded middle. It's, you can be indifferent. You don't have to be, you know what I mean? You're not, that's just never
right,
works this way. You don't, it's like, oh, you're either with me or against me. No, you can
right,
just not care at
right,
all, one way or the
right.
other. Like,
Absolutely. It just the logical construction of it is just flat wrong, you
yeah,
know? And that is important, folks. Like, I get it. Nobody really likes, I guess there's one debate bro out there that really likes it, but even debate bros don't like it when an entire debate is just like, that's a fallacy. Oh, that's this fallacy. Oh, that's that fallacy. Blah, 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 blah,
yeah,
fallacy. Like, yeah, it gets boring and it sucks and you don't ever really make any progress on the conversation. Um,
true.
but it is worth knowing these, because by definition, if a statement is fallacious, then there is a problem with the chain. There is an issue. You're saying in an argument, 1 and 2 leads to 3. But the whole point of a fallacy is explicitly saying, no, it actually doesn't follow. And that's a good thing for us to be able to casually recognize. Like when a TV presenter says, well, it's a slippery slope to blah, 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 just be comfortable recognizing that they named the fallacy they're using. They named it. They
I hate it,
called it out. And it's like, it would be as if somebody goes, it's a false dichotomy that you're either with me or against me, but I believe it. It's like,
but
okay,
that's
that's
true though. Yeah.
okay. All right.
That is so funny that people do that without realizing it. I
Cracks
love it.
me up. And it just, yeah, it really does. It blows my mind. And also, like, one of my other favorite ones, of course, is ad hominem, because anytime you insult somebody, people are just like, well, that's an ad hominem. And it's like, no, it was an insult. I didn't say, for instance, Peter is wrong because he's a jackass. No, I said Peter is wrong and
And
he's a
also,
jackass. And also, two completely separate claims that I feel I can totally demonstrate and back up. But maybe
exactly.
later on in the article.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that. That's
Yes,
good.
totally worth using. It's
Oh
like, that's
yeah,
a fallacy. That's an ad hominem. It's like, no, I was just insulting you. Like,
yeah. I
I'll
didn't
just
say that.
own it.
Yeah,
You're a dipshit. I'll own it. Also,
and
you're incorrect.
that's separate issue. Not saying that's
Separate
why. That's great. I love it. So, when faced with socially acceptable truths that undermine our faith, how are we to react if we continue to allow our government and large corporations to bully us? They will gradually transform our culture into such extreme rebellion, Jesus, that persecution of Christians will be normalized.
Remember how we
Jesus.
talked about that slippery slope just like 2 seconds ago? Isn't it awesome when you call out a fallacy out of the air and then the person actively utilizes it in the next sentence? It's great.
It's called pre-bunking. We
Yeah, it's
pre-bunk.
it's literally what he did. It's literally what he did. I just mentioned that one because it's a fun one to point out. People do it all the time. But then he literally uses it. He's like, well, first thing that's going to happen is Target's going to have a couple of stuff with rainbow flags on it. And the next thing you know, they're going to be actively hunting down Christians and putting bullets in the back. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? What the hell is wrong with you, man? It's just ridiculous to think that it's going to go from that to that. There's so many other things in between. And this just plays into the persecution complex of Christians. And the reason is because that's baked into the religion fundamentally.
Because they want to be able to persecute. That's the thing.
Yes.
They think like, if you don't let me do the persecuting, then you're persecuting me. It's
Yeah.
so fucked up. It's like exactly the opposite of what they're saying.
Yep.
You know,
It's a bully. It's a bully who comes up to you and beats you up every single day, right? For 5 years, steals your money, rips your clothes, punches you in the face. And then the one day that you stand up, and as they swing their fist, you grab their hand and say, bro, not happening anymore. They fall to the ground and cry, oh, he's beating me. Oh my God, I'm so much pain now. Why would you do my hand? Like, no.
Exactly.
No. That's not how it works, man. Not how it works. And again, it's baked into the religion, right? I do believe, I could be mistaken, but I do believe it's often said that Jesus said this about, there will be those who will persecute you and because of my name. It is an answer that is baked into the religion to get people to not listen when well-founded criticism is brought their way about their beliefs. Because what they can do is they can go, man, you know what? Of course you're criticizing me. Jesus told you would criticize. Jesus said that you would do this. Like, oh my gosh, it's like a friend. A friend is dating somebody, and you don't like that person already. You don't even know them, but you don't like that person that they're dating. So you go up to them and you go, man, you know what? You know this person you're dating is just going to say bad things about me. Like, they're just going to say bad things about me, man. And then so the very first time that there's a discussion between this couple, and one of them says, I think Bob was being a little bit harsh today, So, well, I knew you'd say that. Of course, I knew you would say that. He told me. Bob said that you would say that. And that's just because you have like this personal bias you can't get past. And this is all just made up crap. And it's a measure that is specifically utilized so as to prevent people from ever actually putting any critical thought into legitimate criticism, right? You can now write off all criticism as just being bias and persecution. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense, because you're actively looking for people to criticize you because you already were told that they're going to. And so now when somebody comes up and says, hey man, I don't think it's applying the law equally that you marry people that are heterosexual, but you don't marry people that are homosexual. It kind of seems like you're discriminating against them. Oh, it's persecution. It's just my belief system. It's just my belief system. Like, no, it's not persecution. It's actually legitimate criticism. You're actually, the construction of your argument is flawed. You're also a dick. Again, not an ad hominem, just an extra additional bullet point to talk about. So,
it reminds me of like a fail safe, because like the
exactly.
they have like this other fail safe where they like have that one verse where it's like, there will be false teachers and everything like that, and don't follow the false teachers and all that. Well, who's the false teachers? Well, it's everybody else that's believing stuff that's not your doctrine, even if they're sort of right. Like,
because Brent, you're either with me or against me. See how it all works together. See how it all comes together to put you in this place of just really having bad conclusions, because the method that you're using to get to those conclusions is flawed. That's the problem. That's why skepticism is so important. That's why critical thinking is so important. That's why an understanding of logical arguments is so important, is because they're actually just using a poor methodology to get to conclusions. And if you start correcting how you work towards what is truth, then you actually will come to better answers. You will come to answers that are in line with compassion, that are in line with actual benefit, right? You will do things that avoid harm to people, right? Like, it's just, that's obvious to me. I've said this a good few times, and I'll keep freaking saying it. Properly applied skepticism leads one to the conclusion that LGBTQ rights are fundamental, that they are absolutely human rights. It leads one to being an ally as the best you can, to the LGBTQ community. It is absolutely logical. It 100% follows. And again, if you properly use skepticism, these types of things are never on the table. You're never concerned about potentially going to jail for misgendering somebody. That's never a concern because it's not on the table to begin with. It's something that is just, it's not an option. We don't get to that conclusion. We will never get to the conclusion of saying like, well, yeah, we should just be super discriminatory against people because they're asexual. Like, no, that will never happen. It will never happen properly applying and utilizing this methodology. And it is the right methodology. It is the best methodology. And we can fucking demonstrate that time and time and time again. We can. It's absolutely like, you know, I don't know. I think some people think the I think some people think that quote where it's like, first they came, you know, for the Jews and I said nothing because I'm not Jewish. Then they came for, you know, the socialists and I said nothing because I'm not socialist, you know, and it keeps going, right? And it ends with, and then they came for me and nobody said anything, you know, because nobody was left, right? Now I
Right.
butchered that quote, but I think there are some people out there who think that's like a playbook. Like that's how it's supposed to go, you know? And it just, it cracks me up. It just cracks me up, man. Like the hardcore right wing conservative, you know, far right Christian nationalist stuff that's going around. They are not fans of you, of you non-religious person. Yeah, I mean, sure, maybe y'all agree a little bit more on taxes and how they should be spent. Great, but you know what they don't agree on? The fundamental right of you being a human and having the ability to live your life in a manner that is not harmful to others. They don't agree with that. And once they can get rid of every other category out there that they disagree with more, guess how that, again, the quote ends with they came for me and nobody said anything. And that's how it'll end. That's how it'll end every single freaking time.
Every
So,
time,
yeah.
It's like that poem. I always forget what the name of it is, but I do really like that poem. Um, let's see. Well, so okay, so persecution against Christians will be normalized. If we love our children and grandchildren and care about their spiritual well-being, then we must consider this strongly. If we fail to show our children the power of Christ in our lives by refusing to stand up for what is right and against what is wrong, what biblical values will they themselves give up when persecution increases and intensifies throughout their own lives? It's all about the children, you know.
Absolutely. And notice how quickly he just moved off of grandparents. He just very quick. He like mentioned them and then said nothing about the grandparents. It's just weird. Like I guess they or grandchildren. I'm sorry. I guess they don't matter that much. Like we only care about the next generation.
I mean, climate change. You know, they're
right. They probably won't even be here anyway.
Eat death,
but
you know.
I love that. Again, this is. I don't know. I have to question sometimes. You know, why use the term well-being here? I think it's only problematic for the Christian. And again, something that I've said more and more over the years and fully think, you know, fully believe this. Every moral system I've ever heard of utilizes the concept of well-being. The issue is consistency or lack thereof. I argue that if well-being is a part of your system at all, then it has to be consistently applied throughout the system. Okay. Because otherwise you are going against your own fundamental construct, right? You're basically saying like, it's like, it would be as if you said, okay, we're going to paint the house and we're going to do shades of blue, right? Not all the same color. Sometimes we'll use royal blue. Sometimes we'll use robin's egg blue, but it's all going to be kind of blue, except for this room where we're going to do yellow. And it's like, okay, so that doesn't work with one of the basic principles that you said. And then they're like, yeah, but it's fine here. And it's like, right, but how? Why? What is the justification as to why this one room can not follow the pattern that every other room has to? And there is no answer because that's a fallacy. It's special pleading. It's saying that a certain concept applies across the board 100% consistently, except for this one time, because if it applied there, then I would be wrong.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
don't
they're
like
doing.
that.
That's exactly what he's doing. And so what he's claiming is that well-being is actually what we care about. We do. We really, really do. We care about the well-being, but it's the spiritual well-being that's more important.
It's
Except
kind of well-being.
except for all of those other times where spiritual well-being isn't as important, and what's important is the physical well-being. Like, for instance, if a car crash happened and one of those people was bleeding out, dying on the road, I don't think that guy would care as much about the spiritual well-being of it. Like, let's say, for instance, like this guy, I have no idea, but let's say this guy has children or grandchildren, right? And what he genuinely cares about is their spiritual well-being. So when his child is choking one day at a restaurant, I feel very confident they're going to want to do the Heimlich maneuver, as opposed to making sure that their child is baptized again, right? So it's the physical well-being is what really matters, except for the one time that it's about the spiritual but no, see, it's the spiritual well-being that's actually super deeply important, except for all the times that it's the physical well. There's that inconsistency. And again, if you utilize the concept of well-being at all, it has to be something that is consistently applied throughout the system. And the moment that there is a breakdown in that, you have to readjust, because you're literally contradicting what is supposedly the fundamental axiom of it would be like saying, hey, we use logic all the time, everywhere, except when we work with computers. We don't do logic then, and using logic here is a bad idea. It's like, you see why that's a problem? Yeah, hopefully. He doesn't, though, because he literally published this article. He does not see what the problem is, but I hope at least all of our wonderful viewers out there do now. Like,
hopefully, yeah. I mean, it ends up just being a stream of consciousness of like, I don't like these people, and I want to feel justified in that. You know what I mean?
Yes, it really is. It really is. But that's okay, because again, this is I enjoy this. This is fun for me, and yeah, I don't often get to break things down like this to such a degree, and so when I have the opportunity, I love to show it, because it's just like very, very quickly somebody can say something like that, and you read over it, you skim over it, and you think like, man, honestly, I kind of get this. It kind of makes sense where he's coming from. But the issue is that he's utilizing concepts that absolutely butt up against each other and disagree with each other. And if you do that, then that has to be pointed out. But the problem is that you can just very quickly say, well, it's a slippery slope, so they're putting all the Christians in jail. And a lot of people go, oh my gosh, that'd be terrible. Again, not recognizing the very basic fact that you just named the problem with your argument. You called it out, you know?
And the special pleading is, but my religion is true, though.
Yeah, see?
Theirs
Right,
are all
right.
stupid
Exactly, exactly. You're right. In every other context, that would be a bad argument. But see, it's fine in my context, because I just had it right to begin with. I was just lucky enough to be in the center of Correctville, I guess. I don't know.
I was already right this whole time.
Right. So really, I don't even need the argument. I'm just doing it for your sake, you know?
I'm trying to help you out, man. Jesus. So it said, civil disobedience is the means of peacefully expressing disagreement with the laws of those who rule or govern. It is a nonviolent, peaceful method of protesting regulations and restrictions that are unethical or immoral. You know, unless you kneel at a football game, that's just fucked up, right?
Yeah, then somehow that crosses the line. Yeah, I think it's always worth, you know, when we're criticizing ideas or people, I think it's always worth, you know, pointing out the places that they get it right. Technically, I don't see any problem in those two sentences, although he was just basically quoting a dictionary. So I would have been, particularly surprised if he did get it wrong. But I do want to, at
Civil
the very
disobedience is punching cops in the face. That's what it
right,
is. That's the
right,
definition.
right. Like I
Well,
know
all
we're
right.
used to, I know we're used to criticizing people who get absolutely everything wrong. But I think it's worth pointing out that yes, he technically does seem to understand what civil disobedience is. That is correct. He will then go on to just apply it completely incorrectly, but that's what we're getting to. So I'll wait for him to say the dumb things, and then I'll point out how they're wrong. So
Okay, we'll highlight them on the screen for you.
that's right.
Uh, so, because Christ lives in us, gross. We have the power of the Holy Spirit, the Spirit that leads us in righteousness and writes God's word upon our hearts. This Spirit within us allows us to take actions of civil disobedience in standing for our faith, even when it is uncomfortable, deemed politically incorrect, or even unlawful. And just real quick, I want to point out this word, that's bullshit. Jesus said specifically to give Caesar what's Caesar's and to
I
follow
know.
the laws because God's put them there,
Yep.
you know? So they're
Yep.
just fucking wrong all the way
Yep.
around on this.
Yep.
Like,
And again, truly, what that moment is, in the Bible, in Jesus's story, that moment is an answer to why the things that are ordained by God haven't actually happened. Like, for instance, wouldn't it just be a terrible shame if the temple was destroyed, despite the fact that God was on their side and actively was making sure that the temple wasn't going to be destroyed? That would be a terrible, terrible fate befalling somebody who believes that their magic feller in the sky is actually real and doing things, because then that would kind of be a result that would disprove that thing.
a little bit, yeah.
But but see, but if you add the caveat that no, in fact, the person who's out there that is currently in charge of Rome, that is actively kicking out Christians, which, just real quick, isn't really historically true. Like, people like to talk about, a bunch of Christians being thrown to the lions in the Colosseum. We really have no evidence of that. It's just worth noting. That's just a historical fact. Very easy to look up and correct your mistake when you say stuff like that, Mr.
Yeah,
Demos.
but Bart
But
Amron says that it wasn't that they were Christians ever. It
no,
was the only time people were persecuted, and it was all different groups of people, was
yeah,
because they weren't worshiping the Roman gods,
yeah,
right? Because then anything bad that happens to the city, well, that's your fault because
right,
you weren't worshiping the gods that we need you to worship, right? You know
right.
what I mean? So it's
Right.
but
Right.
yeah, it's not
Again,
because they were
no
Christian.
good evidence that Christians were rounded up at all in the Roman times. No good evidence of really any major persecution against people of the Christian faith, except for some specific examples throughout history that, oddly enough, people like, say, I don't know, the Republican Party in the United States hasn't said jack shit about. It's weird that they only seem to care about Christian persecution when it's affecting them, but literally don't care about it when it happens in other places in the world where people are actually imprisoned for their beliefs and stuff. But hey, that's okay. There's a lot of religious groups that turn a blind eye to stuff like that. Why? I have no idea. Maybe it's because they're hypocritical. Don't know.
Yeah,
But yeah, this moment right here, this part right here is particularly strange, exactly because of what you just said, man. Like, Jesus explicitly lays out that there is a difference in the worldly authority and the heavenly authority. And for some reason, that seems to be missed by the majority of believing and practicing Christians. I don't know how they skip that over. I don't know how they justify that, but they do, or at least try to. So yeah, that's what we're seeing here from this guy.
definitely. Yeah, I just watched I cover this wretched guy that's so weird. He's like a radio host and he talks
Mm.
so strange. But he did a whole breakdown of just that, like being like, no, civil disobedience isn't really allowed unless it's like them telling you to not, you're not allowed to worship and stuff like that or whatever.
Right, right, right,
Yeah.
right. In that context, yes. I would agree. Like, yeah, in that context, I would say there is a mandate. I think you could very easily pull examples from the Bible to say, if all of a sudden the government turned into a thing where it was like the law on the book says actively go out and criminalize, Christians just for being Christians for no other thing. First off, I would absolutely stand in support with the Christians who are fighting that. I would be happy
Right.
to stand on the side of that because I disagree with that. But the reason I disagree with that is not because I have a Christian faith. It is not because of anything like that. It's because I believe in human rights. And that is a violation of human rights. And it's a violation of human rights because of the harm that it brings, because well-being is important, because I've properly applied logic and skepticism. That's the chain. That's the
Yeah.
chain. It doesn't start with this magic answer that can just be manipulated anytime that we want. No, there's a logical progression there. Whereas what our good friend Petey here is trying to do is go the opposite way and somehow retroactively justify it and say, oh
Yeah.
no, it actually is good,
Right.
But anyway,
Like he said, so he goes, we can be assured that God's word overrides governmental authority and societal standards.
except when it doesn't, but
Yeah, like
except
slavery.
literally all the times it doesn't, but whatever.
Therefore, when man's law violate biblical laws and when social pressures oppose his capital T or at capital H, I'm sorry, capital T
That's
truth,
right.
we must engage in saying no to these devices of wickedness.
Yeah, again, except for all the times that it actively doesn't. Like, I love the fact that, despite what Jesus says, himself, Jesus came to fulfill the law. Yeah. So does that mean that the law goes away? No, it doesn't, because that's not an understanding of the word fulfill or an understanding of the word law in any context. It's not an understanding of that phrase anywhere whatsoever. So it's weird how all these Christians aren't like hardcore yelling about all these clothes with mixed threads, Like, it's crazy how nobody seems to be up in arms about a 70-30 polyester cotton blend that exists all over the world. It's crazy that nobody seems to be super upset about people eating pigs now and shellfish. It's just absolutely wild, that Christians have succumbed to the social pressures, and these devices of wickedness, like, I don't know, two different plants being planted in the same field by a farmer. It's just
Forgot about that one.
It's just super weird, man, that nobody's up in arms about parents not beating their children to death for having sex outside of marriage. It's just weird how all of these devices of wickedness are being utilized by, man's law and society. It's just, again, it's like, it's just ridiculous that you would say something with such authority and being so overarching and all encompassing when it's like, man, I can come up with 10 examples off the top of my head, not even trying. Like, I got no notes here, people. I don't have any notes. This is just me reading this again, okay? Like, for the third time, this is me looking over the words and just being like, oh yeah, this one's really stupid. Like, here's a good couple of examples I could just pull off the top of my head that disproves this. Like, it's frustrating because, again, you can see the pattern that I've already pointed out to you about. We start by stoking tensions. We give you the justification for stoking those tensions. And now we're on to the point of, like, here's what you do. Now that you're pissed off about all this nonsense and evilness that's happening. Oh no, now here's what you do. And it's just like, but you're not even following that. And I have really good examples as to how you're not following that, man. So, like, do you care about consistency? do you really? Because it seems like you don't. And if you don't care about consistency, look, that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and try and point out to you how inconsistent you are when you say you don't care about consistency, because you give a shit about it every other time in your life, except for now. This is the time where you don't care if it's consistent. But wait, if you reframe it and you think about it from a point of view of hate, and you think about it from a point of view of just actively trying to cause harm to people, then suddenly the consistency appears again. Suddenly you can see it, because again, that this is purposefully framed in a way that is actively trying to mischaracterize things and actively trying to stoke tensions, because that's what's been effective for getting people out to the polls, for getting these individuals to go out there and cause a ruckus and disturb society and instill fear in people for no other reason than them just living their lives. That's what this is. And he's going point by point. He's following that playbook perfectly and actively just ignoring all of the things that clearly disagree with his take. So it's great. It's great. Again, I'm not saying I like it because I think it's right or anything. I'm saying I like it because this is a wonderful example of just how horribly flawed both the moral compass and the methodology for truth many individuals have in this camp. Not everybody. This is not all Christians. I can name 5 people I know personally off the top of my head that would hardcore disagree with all of this and would say this guy is purposefully twisting the message of God so as to cause more hatred in the world. But yeah, there are a shit ton of religious folks who use this method, this playbook. And it's just great to point it out and be like, look, that's what they're doing. You know, this is why he says stuff like this. It's because he doesn't care if it's right. He doesn't care if you can find a shit ton of examples that easily disagree with that. Therefore, when manslaughter violate biblical laws, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, man, you don't follow that yourself. And I can prove it to you time and time and time and time again. But you don't care about that. No. Because you're just gonna go back to, well, you just want to persecute me because I'm a Christian to begin with. Because if you're not with me, you're against me. And as evidence of that, I'm gonna stoke fear about this law that, you know, doesn't actually say or do the thing that it does. It's like, well, there you go. See, you're falling right back into it, bro.
Right.
We caught you. We know what you're doing. We see it now. But you know, I guess he's actually, you know, he can't hear us or anything. So I guess we just have to read the article as it's written.
Might be a viewer. I don't know.
Might be a viewer. That's a good point. Yeah. If you're watching out there, Petey, just give us a call sometime and we'll gladly talk with you and point out to you how incorrect you are.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna try to finish this in the next half an hour.
Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. It's my fault. I do apologize to Eric. I don't think I've been on here without us going to like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So
that's like the minimum. Yeah.
That's on me.
It's all right. That's good content though. That's what makes it good. So where are we at here? So whether it's Las Vegas. Okay, so we did
that last one.
Okay, so now he's doing a Bible verse. This is Matthew 16:25. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Oh, that's right, because it's more of that persecution.
Right. And just another example of the active enjoyment and excitement for suffering and for pain. And this is, you know, this is something that is fundamental throughout, a lot of belief systems. It's just glorifying suffering and doing so to such a ridiculous degree, right? It's a death cult, and not because it is founded on a death, right? And wholly focused on that, but it also because it is actively seeking death, and not just death, but a terrible death, one similar to that of Christ. Because that's what shows you truly believe. When you bleed for me as your Lord and Savior, that's how I know you really care. That's gross.
Take up your cross, you know. That's
right. That's gross and that's abuse. Imagine a partner saying that. Imagine a significant other saying that. that when you truly love me, you bleed for me. You're suffering for me.
Right.
It's just once again shows the complete and total broken morality that comes from the Bible.
Yeah, and it keeps you in in that manipulative state, where you can just, you got to put your own desires away. That's all manipulation. That's all it
Exactly.
is. It's just,
Exactly.
it's gross. But okay, hating sin to love others. Okay, acceptance of sin is not loving. What good is it for someone to gain the world and lose their soul for eternity? It is right for us to accept sin for the sake of fearing offense when it means that others are living in darkness without truth. What does sin look like in progression and multiplication as our nation comes to normalize evil and ignore God?
And I
Jeez.
I'm not gonna beat this dead horse anymore, because I really think once again you can see the absolute bankrupt ideology when it comes to good and evil, pain and pleasure, harm and benefit, that this individual and individuals like him have internalized. They have completely warped their system of what is good to be one that is consistent with whatever their belief already is, despite the obvious places that there are problems, right? Despite the clear examples time and time again that discounts what they're saying and demonstrates how incorrect it is. But what this person is doing is he is trying to justify, he's working backwards why the suffering that he is asking others to inflict on people is actually not suffering. He's working backwards. He recognizes that in any other context, the things that he advocates for would be problematic. He knows that. But what he does is he says, no, see, you got it wrong. See, in every other scenario, sure, we go from A to B to C to D to Z. Perfect. But see, this one time, because of Z already, gotta change around B and C and D, and yeah, gotta change that up. It's
Yeah.
backwards. It's absolutely backwards.
Because I was already right, and so now I was right the
I
whole time.
already knew the correct answer, that all those lesbians and gay people out there are just evil. So now I have to work backwards and justify it.
Right.
Yeah, again,
Jeez.
it's the bankrupt morality that we get told on a regular basis is what's actually in our hearts. And yeah, that's why there are angry atheists out there. It's
Yeah.
frustrating as hell for somebody to tell me that I'm an immoral person, because I just want to be compassionate and uplifting to people. And instead, what I should do is constantly make fun of them and mock them and throw insults at them. That's the loving thing to do. Yeah,
Right.
sure. Great.
Jeez. Yeah, exactly. These all crucial questions we need to ask ourselves, determining our stance from which we must take action. Michigan is merely a drop in the ocean of what is to come for Christians in America. We have the choice now to stand up for righteousness, not only for the sake of ourselves and our families, but also for those who are the victims of this movement and the very men and women who have yet to know their true identities in Christ.
So a fun statistic that is worth noting, by believers and non-believers of different stripes, members of the LGBTQ community or not, allies, non-allies, just a fun little fact of the world. The majority of people who self-describe themselves as part of the LGBTQ plus community also self-describe themselves as believers of some faith. You know why? Because the number of non-believers in this world is still a minority. It still is. It is still more likely that somebody will be a believer than a non-believer. Blindfold yourself, spin around 3 times in a fucking Walmart, and point to somebody. If you guess that they're a non-believer, you're probably going to be wrong unless there's something really clear about them, like they're wearing a shirt that says, I don't believe in God, you know? Also, in the United States, the number of self-described individuals in the queer community, again, self-describe themselves as not just religious, but guess what? Christian.
Yeah. Specifically.
Again,
Yeah.
because the largest group of believers in the United States are Christian. So it's just a little gross that basically what that guy is saying there with that last sentence was, if they truly come to Christ, then they'll just put away all that homosexuality. They'll just put away all that trans ideology stuff. And that's just gross and it's stupid. It's clearly wrong, and it's just offensive because, yeah, again, they're true identities in Christ.
Yeah, it's very much on the nose, like a bit like it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it's just gross. So it's like, again, hey, just I'm not the one saying this. You know, I'm just pointing out this person's words. I want to accurately reflect what he's saying. And what he is saying there is that you can't really be a Christian and be queer. That's what he's saying.
Exactly. Straight up. So we are all called to be different than Pilate. We can no longer stand idly by and watch our society crumble at the hands of hell.
I didn't realize hell had hands. I thought it had gates, but whatever. I don't
care.
Maybe it's not literal.
Hell Hands would be a great metal band.
Hell Hands would be a great metal band. That's very true. Hello, we are Hell Hands.
The Hands of Hell or some shit. That'd be great.
Yeah.
We have the power of the Holy Spirit to stand boldly encouraged for the things that are biblical, truthful, and loving.
Right. Again, see, again, and that's what happens time and time again, is the religious like to use these understandings, and they tell us that what's actually happening is loving. Again, this is an abusive relationship. This is a significant other who says, I beat you every night because I love you, right?
Yeah.
I restrict you from going to spend time with your friends, not because I think they might point out the fact that I'm a piece of shit to you or lying to you. No. It's because I care about your well-being. I care about your well-being. That's the corruption. That's the corruption. That's why I will never stop yelling about that stuff. I will never stop talking about how horribly destructive religion is. And it's because of this, because it twists the moral compass to the point that you're justifying slavery. Right. You're finding reasons as to why the atrocities that you stand with are actually good things, when in every other scenario, there's no question. There's no question.
Straight up. We can trust that Jesus, the one who spoke the world into existence, is on our side. He hears us, cares about us, and loves us deeply. He is sovereign over the things of this world and has given us a spirit of power, love, and sound mind.
Except, of course, apparently when the Michigan legislature was being elected. Like, somehow he's sovereign over things of this world, except for that. It's a weird, I don't know how that makes sense in this guy's mind. But hey.
We need you to disobey the law because your God wasn't good enough to fucking
just do it himself. Yeah,
exactly.
Super weird, man. Don't know how that happened, God. Don't know if you were just rested on that day or what. Like,
right?
I don't know.
He was on the toilet that day. That was like, we are chosen, appointed people with the ability to radically transform the world through the power of God within us.
Again, don't know why he just doesn't do it himself.
Right.
But whatever.
And again, that's just such manipulative language. Like, you got you. It just reminds me of something like like Hitler or something would be like, you got to do this, y'all. Get up. You got the God inside you. You got the right to do all that. Whatever. You know, it's just a way to like tell people you got to be hurtful, regardless if it's legal or not.
And it's just one of those. It's one of those, you know, garbage little pieces that's put into the faith explicitly as an answer to what is legitimate criticism, right? Because God helps those who help themselves, right? Well, so there you go. That's the justification for why you didn't get the thing that you sincerely asked God for. It's because you actually didn't do enough. But see, then when out of nowhere, when all the pieces just scatter and fall, and it just so happens to work out in this way that really, when you think about it for a minute, actually kind of make sense, because it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense that somebody would show up here. This is a pretty busy road, and it's like broad daylight. So yeah, me having a flat tire and somebody coming by to help me is more coincidental than it. But see, that it answers it. See, because you helped yourself, man. Because you didn't just sit idly by waiting for God to take care of it. No, you got out of the car and you started jacking up the car, and you pulled out the tire iron and you got the spare, and oh, wait a second, that's just all normal activity that any reasonable person would accomplish. So yeah, it's
Amazing.
like it's this answer so that you don't have to think critically, right?
Yeah.
You actually have to get up and do the things and radically transform the world, but it's through the power of God within you, by the way, because God's actually doing it all, again, except for the Michigan House of Representatives for some reason, or the
Yeah.
presidency,
Right.
or like
For
all
all
of
the
the other examples.
and all the stuff we don't like. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those answer all, answer nothing answers that
Yep.
they love so much,
Yep.
So this is the last verse that we got here. It says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect."
It's fascinating.
Oh God.
It's fascinating here. Again, I'm confused why certain words were chosen. Like, for instance, that particular moment that says that by testing you may discern what is the will of God. That's so weird that he would purposefully use that,
Yeah.
because it seems like that would be contrary to faith. One would argue
Can't
that is
test God. What are you doing? Even
that's
Jesus
the
said you can't test.
specific thing that's like not okay, is the testing of God. Super weird. Super weird. Now, one could say, well, what he's saying here is that by doing certain actions, one can understand what is the will of God, right? You're not really testing God. What you're doing is you're testing actions and ideals so as to see whether or not they line up with God's will. And okay, I'll accept that, but the problem is that actually still works against you, because when you do the test and it doesn't come out your way, does that mean that you accept God's will is different than you thought? No, of course not. No, of course you don't do that. No, of course you don't do that,
He was
because then
testing
you
me.
wouldn't be a believer
Yeah.
in your faith, because every faith has moments where the conclusion is different than what an individual thought was the will of their deity.
Right.
So do you update? Like for instance, one could argue the fact that the Supreme Court made a ruling and said, oh, actually, it is perfectly within the law to allow individuals who are of the same sex to marry, and continuing to restrict that right would be fundamentally inconsistent with our understanding of how government works, right? One could argue that that means that God agrees with gay marriage based on this understanding. Because see, we tested it.
Oh, right.
And the
Yeah.
way that we tested it was by
Was
taking it to the courts. And then obviously, if God wanted something different, then the ruling would have been different. So the fact that it came out this way means that God is pro LGBTQ. I'm sure our good friend PDD here would agree with that. Don't you think? Don't you think he'd agree with that? Don't you think he'd agree that, hey, wait a second, trans people exist, therefore God must be pro trans, right? I'm sure he would agree with that because of this Bible verse that says, testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. I'm sure he would agree with that. Of course, just for anybody who doesn't know me well, I'm being very, very sarcastic
Sarcastic,
here.
yeah. Okay.
He would definitely not agree, I think. But again, that just shows the inconsistency in the things that he says are what he actually believes. And it just
Yeah.
when you consistently find inconsistencies, folks, okay? When you consistently find inconsistencies, you can just go ahead and write it off as being bullshit. That is absolutely acceptable, because
Yeah.
if there's no consistency, then how the hell do we know what the conclusion is? Because every time we try it, it's going to be something different every single time, because it's not a reliable method. It's not. He didn't present anything in that article that holds true the entire time. And that's important. That's important, folks. Like, you got to be consistent. You got to apply that stuff consistently. You want to say, test and discern the will of God? Fine, man. Go ahead and pray for the children. Go ahead and pray for the St. Jude's hospitals. Go ahead. Do it. And when those numbers come up not in your favor, what are you going to take away from that? Maybe God doesn't really care about the little children, you know? Maybe Jesus didn't see. What Jesus actually said is, fuck all the little children. Let them die terrible deaths. We don't need them. See, that's the will of God, apparently, because of the way that the Catholic Church behaves and the way that children seem to continually die across the world. Yeah, I don't think many believing Christians would agree with that. And that's good that they don't agree with that, because those are bad things. Those are bad things. But the reason they're bad is not because this magic book tells us, right? It's not because some supernatural whatever decided this a long time ago. No. It's because of well-being, or the lack thereof. We're being consistent on the non-religious side. We are saying that's bad because of this foundational starting point of well-being that we use all across the board. They're saying that's bad and then retroactively justifying this over here in the harm space. And they're saying, well, harm is important, but not always. Sometimes it's important. And when it is important, it's actually the spiritual harm that's the most important. Again, of course, except for the times where the immediate physical harm is so bad. Again, I really doubt that this cat would be like, man, oh no, my child just died in a car crash, which I absolutely don't wish on anybody, of course. I don't want anybody to come to harm or have these terrible moments in their life, but they happen. Like, these things are just the natural world around us. And when the tree falls in the storm and it kills somebody, I doubt this guy is going to be going, well, thank goodness we tested and understood the will of God here. Thank goodness we figured that out correctly. I highly doubt that. And there's good reason that he doesn't feel that way. And it's because despite his disgusting, harmful ideology, he's still a human. And the things that are good about humanity come from the fact of just being human. They don't come from anywhere else. Like, this whole God's message is written on our heart. God's love is written on our heart. It's bullshit, and I hate the way that it's phrased. But you know what's true is that there's something innate about being a human. There is something deeply fundamental to being a human that when we see others suffering, we give a shit. Not always to the same degree and not always correctly, but there's something about that really sticks with us. And that has nothing to do with magic. It has nothing to do with a god. It has nothing to do with an ancient text. It has to do with the fact that you are human. And that is one of the most beautiful fucking things in the world. And again, it's places like this. It's poor methodology for understanding the truth. It's religion and faith that twists that uses that against people and turns it into the most disgusting thing ever. So it's not Christians I have a problem with. It's Christianity. Exactly. It's the ideology itself is fundamentally harmful.
Yeah, it's I can't remember who said it, but I really do like the quote where they say, "Good people do good things, and people do bad things." But it takes something like religion to make good people do bad things. You know,
100%.
it is really true.
Absolutely. Because it's ad hoc reasoning with a conclusion you've already accepted. And when you do that test, you don't care. You're not
No,
interested because testing isn't actually a part of your ideology.
no,
It's
you've
not a
already decided the conclusion before you did the test, and you were gonna work your way back around to what you wanted it to be as a result
exactly.
anyway. So yeah,
Exactly.
it's
You don't
amazing.
care about consistency. You don't care about harm and suffering. You really don't. All you care about is getting to your answer, however you do that. And I would rather every single day that somebody get the answer to the math problem wrong. The final answer to the math problem. It's supposed to be 2, but you said 3. And let me tell you something, my friend, that is not the correct answer. But I have seen your work. I see how you laid out the steps to get to this answer. And you made a mistake right here near the end. And that's a problem. And we should talk about it. We should correct that. We should have a better understanding. Totally agree. But your work shows me that you understand the concepts. And it shows me that you can apply them consistently across the board. Right. Whereas this person got the correct answer, but absolutely everything that they did to get to that is completely wrong. I would always prefer the first person in that scenario every single time. We will never be 100% correct when it comes to what is morality. We will never be perfect. We will never be perfect in terms of minimizing harm and maximizing well-being. We will never be perfect, but I would prefer every single day the imperfect answer, but the steps and the method for getting there to be solid and robust and true, rather than the person who shows up at the door with the list of what is correct. That, yeah, great, it's right, man. Technically, it all fits, but have absolutely no justification, no reasoning, no work shown. Every single time, I'm picking that first person. Every single time, because it's that person that actually has a greater chance of getting to the right place, getting to the correct answer. Every time, man. Every single time. So
Yeah, straight up. Well, hey man, do you want to give us some plugs? Give some pluggables.
yeah, sure. So it just so happens that tomorrow, right? Today's Saturday. Yeah, my days are a little messed up. I've been watching the Women's World Cup, and it's over in Australia and New Zealand this year. So it's like
Oh, nice.
crazy radical times. I may have technically woken up this morning at like 4 a.m. to watch some games. Doesn't matter. The point, yeah. But tomorrow, Sunday, I will be on the Atheist Experience again with Dave Warnock. Very excited about that.
Oh, yeah.
We took this Wednesday off because I needed a little bit of a rest, but this coming Wednesday, I'll be back on Atheist Republic with Armin Navabi, breaking down bad arguments. We tend to stick with the Islamist apologists. Those are great. That's great fun. Again, just another chance for me to kind of go into a vein where I don't always go, and so I really do enjoy it. But yeah, other than that, if you want to find me, you just go to one of the social media things and just type in secular rarity. I haven't downloaded Threads yet, y'all. Like,
Oh
I don't
man.
know. Maybe I
Yeah.
will, maybe I won't. I don't know. I'm already bad about checking all the stuff that I have anyway. So it's like, I get people that'll message me on like, one app, and they'll be like, "Hey, did you get that message I sent you on this other thing 2 months ago?" And I'm like, maybe. But also you have my attention now. What's up? Like,
Yeah.
so
Send it again.
yeah, yeah,
It's,
for sure. I don't know.
but
Maybe
yeah.
you'll find me on Threads eventually, but if you really want to go check out what I'm doing, you can see Twitter, Facebook, and then if you go to YouTube and you type my name in, you won't find a channel really, but you will find me hanging out on other cool places like this. Like we've done this like what, 3 times now? Is that how many times?
Yeah, 3 or 4. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think so.
That's good. Yeah.
Oh,
See,
yeah.
I don't know why you keep inviting me back, because I just end up ruining your whole day. I think with time, you're like, all right, man, I expected this to be like 30 minutes, and here we are like 3 hours later. So
I can break it up. It's all right. I figured
okay. Give you some editing practice. Good.
Right, there you go. Exactly. But thank you so much, man, for hanging out. This is a lot of fun. I always enjoy your takes and breaking it all down. It's awesome. But we have this sign off where I say who we're going to say fuck off to, and then we do our best to say fuck off together, right? So what do we say to the haters, discriminators, and masturbators, shamers? Fuck off.
That's pretty good.
Solid. That was really good. Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out. That was awesome. And I will be back with you not tomorrow, but the next day. So take it easy, y'all.